What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Breaking into IT on TaylorMade with AT. Today, we're going to review our tests from week 1 and 2, and then we're going to jump into networking for week 4 and 5 and go ahead and introduce you guys to networking devices as well as different networking connections and what networking means as a whole in the IT space. Let's dive into the test. As you can see here from week 1 and 2, the review test is based on course and certification questions. So I pulled these questions directly from the Comptia A Plus. So if you are looking to gain more knowledge about the Comptia A Plus and want to learn information that is directly relevant to the certification, then go ahead and follow along with us because that is literally what this whole thing is based off of. So when you go in here and you check out question 1. What test provides knowledge on hardware and networking? The Network Plus offers relevant knowledge on hardware and networking as well as the Security Plus. The actual test that our course is based off of is the CompTIA A Plus. So the CompTIA A Plus is the correct answer for number 1. Joe, a user, needs to have a notebook connected to a monitor, a mouse, and a keyboard when he is working at his desk. His notebook is not business class, yet is meeting company policy for personal computers. Which of the following should a technician install for Joe? On this one, the Security Plus is obviously not an option because it's a certification. Port forwarding device, we didn't cover that in our introductory level hardware course for week 1 and 2, so you can kind of nix that out of there. A USB hub and a KVM switch are both two things. I think the USB hub is the USB hub. The USB hub would be viable. Um, the USB hub could be viable depending on what kind of connections your device has. But and the KVM switch is something that connects multiple devices together, so you can control multiple devices at once. That is something that we covered on our course, and that's usually found in our server room, and it connects all of our networking equipment together, so we can interact with it on one monitor on one device. So for question number 2, the answer is a docking station. And a docking station is basically something that you'll interact with as a technician when you're setting up a dual monitor setups in the office or for home setups. Your docking station connects your monitors and your keyboard and your mouse to your laptop using a lightning cable or a USB-C um, connection. So keep that in mind. The docking station is what you'll want to recommend for this particular client's personal computer. Which of the following is the minimum category cable that supports 1,000 megabits per second speed? So the Cat5e is the cable that supports 1,000 megabytes per second. The Cat3 doesn't, and the Cat6 and the Cat6e are both newer versions of the cable that support up to a gig speed. So the Cat5e is the correct answer here. The Cat5e is the current standard cable that we utilize the most today. Question 4. A customer's workstation will not boot. A technician runs diagnostics on the system and discovers it is set up in RAID 0 configuration and a single SATA hard drive has failed. The system will set up for performance. Once repaired, the customers request redundancy be built into the system, and in case in performance, which of the following describes how technicians should set up the new RAID configuration. It was set up in RAID 0, which offers fairly good performance, but it doesn't offer any redundancy. The customer requests redundancy be built into the system and an increase in performance. So if you look at these, really, if you think about what we went over in the course as far as the RAID configurations, we only went over like 4 or 5. We went over 0, 1, 5, and 10. So RAID 1 wasn't the configuration that we should go with. You want to go with the RAID 10 configuration here because RAID 10 is the combination of the best of both worlds from RAID 1 and RAID 0. So you get the performance from RAID 0 and then you get the redundancy factor from RAID 1. So 1 and 0 equals RAID 10. So RAID 10 is the correct answer here. This one's kind of a softball question. Question 5. Which of the following connector types can be used to connect a laptop to a docking station or a port? And we went over this a little earlier. You can use a Thunderbolt or a USB-C. A workstation has RAID 1 and RAID 5 arrays. Although performance is not degraded, management software is reporting a hard disk failure. Which of the following should a technician do next? So a workstation has RAID 1 and RAID 5 failures. So the next step would be to check one of the RAID 5 disks for failure. So on question 6, the first thing you want to do if you're experiencing any type of RAID failure is to figure out which disk is being affected. So you don't need to necessarily rebuild the array, but you need to identify the specific disk that is failing. So first, you want to check one of the RAID 5 disks for failure. If you check A or C, so check one of the RAID 1 disks for failure or check one of the RAID 5 disks for failure, I'll give you points on this one. For the test, I know that the answer for the question, I think, is check one of the RAID 5 disks for failure. I remember seeing that one on the test. But honestly, whenever you have a drive failure, you want to try to identify which drive is failing. That's the first step. If your software can't find which disk is failing, then you'll just have to check all of the disks. Question 7. Which of the following wireless network protocols operates on a 5 gigahertz band and provides data rates in excess of 750 megabytes per second? The answer to that question is 802.11ac, and that is the band that has a rate that exceeds 750 megabits per second. The rest of them, 802.11a, I think is the earlier version. 802.11n is another version of it. 802.11b is a version. 802.11g, I don't think is a version at all. A user wants to add static storage to a laptop and is unable to physically take it apart. Which of the following will be the best solution? So whenever you think static, think volatile and non-volatile. Static is non-volatile, and dynamic would be volatile. So like your RAM would be a dynamic form of storage. So the answer to question 8 is a USB drive. It's a static form of storage, and it's something that's easy to use. Don't think too hard on it. You don't want to take the computer apart. So go ahead and add something external. A network to share isn't a real thing. Could be maybe like a network shared drive, but even that you would need to set up like a server or something that you can share to, or another computer. An optical drive is like a DVD, and most computers don't come with CD-ROMs anymore. And then cloud storage is another solution. The easiest static solution is going to be a USB drive. Question 10. An end user brings in a laptop that no longer charges. A technician troubleshoots the laptop and notices it works while the power adapter is plugged in, but shuts down as soon as it is unplugged. Which of the following is the next best step to resolve this issue? So whenever you think about power issues, if a computer won't turn on, something like that, you think power. And if it works while it's plugged in, then you always want to check the battery. The battery is probably failing on the device. That's why whenever it's not plugged in, the battery cannot sustain a charge or power the device. So replace the laptop's battery is the answer for question 9. Joe, a user, wants his RAID configuration to allow the fastest speed and the most storage capacity. His desktop has 3 hard drives. Which of the following RAID types should a technician configure to achieve this. So you want to go with 0 for the best performance. A user notices the system clock is changed every morning. The computer is shut down daily. A technician checks the time zone and finds it's correct, and then checks the BIOS settings and finds the time to be incorrect. Which of the following is the most likely the problem? So whenever your time clock is off or your time zone or things are off, always want to check that CMOS battery. That CMOS battery charge probably doesn't have a charge or probably not getting a charge. So whenever you see anything time wise, clock wise, definitely check the CMOS battery for question 11. So A. Question 12. A technician is upgrading a user's smartphone and wants to move all the applications and contact information quickly to the new device. Which of the following connection types would work best to do this? So you can use NFC to send data with your phone, and that's probably going to be the quickest way to transfer data from device to device. Question 13. A technician is building a CAD workstation. Remember, CAD is software that is used to develop like 3D engineering tools. Engineers use it a lot to develop three-dimensional tools that they will later prototype in real life. But before they make it in real life, they'll use the CAD software to develop it in a 3D virtual space. Um, so a technician is building a CAD workstation for a user who will be saving files remotely. Which of the following components are most important to include when configuring a system? So for a CAD workstation, with any type of 3D designer or application, you want to have a good graphic card because you want to be able to display that information in real time and you want to be able to process it on your display. So your graphic card is going to be huge. The next thing you're going to need is RAM. You're going to need a lot of RAM because you're going to need a lot of processing power or a lot of memory. You're going to need a lot of short-term memory for to run these programs. These programs are cumbersome and they're going to utilize a lot of your resources, your memory resources from your RAM. Question 14. A technician has set up a laptop projector for a presentation. When plugging in the projector, it mirrors the desktop screen from the laptop, but everything appears distorted and compressed. Which of the following should the technician do to correct the appearance of the image on the projector? So if everything seems distorted and compressed, the main thing to do would be to change the desktop resolution. The resolution would clear up the picture. Which of the following FireWire 802.1 standards include the use of MIMO technology? Which of the following IEEE which of the following IEEE 802.11 standards includes the use of MIMO technology? 802.11n. So when you think of MIMO, think of in MIMO. Question 16. A user calls the help desk stating a laptop is performing slow and the hard drive activity lights are blinking continuously. A technician checks for enough hard drive space, disables the antivirus and indexing services, and runs a full system diagnostics check, which returns no failure. Which of the following should the technician do next? The technician should check for hard drive firmware updates. So you should check for updates on the firmware for your hard drive. That will be the first step that you want to do to troubleshoot some of your hard drive failure issues. Which of the following is used to connect a headset to a laptop? The eSATA is part of the hard drive. Remember we talked about SATA being, remember we talked about SATA be a part of a drive. BNC, RG6, we didn't cover these. So the USB is the obvious choice for question 17. Which of the following requires less current to provide the same amount of power to devices inside a PC? So 220 volts is the answer here. A network administrator would like to increase network bandwidth to 1 gig between two office buildings that are half a mile apart. Which of the following would be the best solution? Fiber is going to be your best solution because fiber fiber is better for long distances, so it helps data travel further, faster. So fiber is going to be your best option for getting that job done. And the main factor here is the distance. The distance is what separates fiber from the rest of these forms of cabling. Which of the following connector types can be plugged into the device both right side up and upside down? This is a USB-C. The USB-C is shaped like an oval, so it doesn't matter which way it goes in. The pins are in the middle, so it'll connect through that middle part regardless of if it's right side up or upside down. And here we go. We are on to the short answer questions. What is the purpose of the BIOS in a computer system? The BIOS has a bunch of different purposes, mostly to boot up and initialize the hardware that is located on the motherboard, so your CPU doesn't know, or your computer doesn't know, what hard drive to use to boot up a system or where the operating system is, and your BIOS basically takes care of that. It does a post. It performs a post, which is a power on self test. It tests all the configurations for the hardware on your system upon boot up. So an error during the post will let you know by a series of beeps or text messages on the screen whether or not there's an issue initializing your computer. So it basically is booting the operating system. The BIOS is bringing the operating system to life, booting it from your hard drive or whatever drive you decide to boot it to. And it's providing a software interface for you to interact with your computer on that level. So the BIOS is a hardware component as well as a software interface that you will use during the boot process of your computer. The term RAID. RAID is basically storage that provides redundancy. It allows for hot swapping. Hot swapping is when one disk fails, you'll be able to swap that disk out and go ahead and replace it with another one. And there are certain forms of RAID that do support this and other forms that don't. There are certain levels of RAID that do have redundancy and certain levels of RAID that are basically built for performance. We kind of hit those hard over our last review, so I'm not going to go too deep into RAID, but RAID is basically a culmination of disks in an array that all work together, and they store data by either duplexing, mirroring, which is basically they mirror the data on either drive, and that could be whether it's one or two drives or 3 or 4 drives. So it's the limit is you have to have at least 2 drives to have a RAID storage system. So between those 2 drives, you can stripe those drives, which is basically where you copy data on one, but you don't copy the same data on the other one. You can duplex, which provides mirroring, where you can copy the data on both devices, and then so on and so forth. So RAID is just a form of storage. Whenever you think RAID, think storage, and think an array of storage devices that are linked together. Explain the concept of virtualization and provide an example of how it can be used in a computing environment. Is basically a virtual machine is a virtual device, a virtual copy of a hardware device. So it can be any hardware device. You can copy a computer, you can copy a switch, you can copy a bevy of different devices. But the basic concept of virtualization is that you will have a computer or a server somewhere, and you will dedicate a certain amount of resources to a virtual computer that resides on that device. So define the term CPU cache and explain its role in enhancing processor performance. CPU cache, also known as a processor cache, is a type of high-speed memory located on the CPU, and it's very close to the processor. So it's located directly on or very close to the processor. It's smaller in size than the computer's main RAM, but much faster to access because of its proximity to the CPU and technology it's built with. So it's basically short-term memory that is volatile. The main purpose of the CPU cache is to store copies of data from frequently used main memory locations. By doing so, the CPU can avoid the slower process of fetching data from the main RAM, improving overall system performance. So basically, what the CPU cache does is it takes a burden off of your CPU by storing that short-term memory. It doesn't store the same amount of short-term memory as your RAM. It's basically there as a pressure valve that alleviates your processing power that your chip has to actually endure when it's running certain applications and certain programs. Differentiate between a full backup and incremental backup, and explain each type when each type is commonly used. Um, a full backup is usually used initially when you ever you get into a new environment. You want to do a full backup if your device is ever compromised. You want to make sure that you back up your data so that if there ever was an issue and there was some ransomware or some type of malware that infected your computer, that you at least had access to your data on a separate hard drive. Um, so you'll usually do a full backup first, and then you'll do an incremental backup. And then there is also another form of backup called a differential backup. And so the incremental backup is basically backing up the information from the full backup as well as changes to that backup. So it's basically backing up one and two, and then the differential backup is for backups subsequently after that. And so a differential backup basically covers backups after the initial full backup, and it covers a little bit wider variety of backups than the incremental backup, which is just an initial backup of the difference between the original full backup and the newly updated backup of the system. So that's your test, 1 through 25. Let me know how you did. I will be grading these and offering lunch to the top three scores. So take your time and be diligent. I know you guys are probably watching this in review. So if you took the test, I appreciate you. If you're watching this just to get a quick review of what we covered in week 1 and 2, I also appreciate you and thank you for tuning in. So I hope this helps you guys out in the future. Like and subscribe to my channel. You know, it really helps for support. And I'll keep busting out these videos for you guys so we can all get on this IT journey and make it to the next level together. Thanks.